There's a mansion hiding in rural Michigan that's terrified people for generations. Not hidden deep in the woods. Not abandoned on some forgotten back road. It's sitting right beside a gas station in Burnside Township. And for just $19, they'll totally let you take a walk inside. But I'm gonna warn you, people who have entered this house over the years claim that they weren't alone. They talk about footsteps echoing through empty hallways, doors moving on their own, growling sounds coming from the basement, shadow figures watching from the tower windows. Some even believe the Bruce Mansion is one of the most haunted homes in all of Michigan. But what makes this place truly fascinating isn't just the ghost stories, it's the history. Because long before paranormal investigators and YouTubers showed up here, this mansion belonged to one of the most powerful families in Michigan's Thumb region. A family that built their fortune during the lumber boom, only to watch parts of their world collapse in fire, tragedy, and death. Tonight, we're stepping inside the Bruce Mansion, and the deeper you go into this story, the stranger it becomes. This is Streets of History. To understand why the Bruce Mansion exists at all, you have to understand Michigan in the late 1800s. Back then, this part of the state looked completely different. Much of Michigan's thumb was covered in dense forest. Massive white pine trees stretched for miles, and lumber had become one of the most profitable industries in all of America. Entire towns exploded almost overnight because of logging, and one of the men who capitalized on that boom was a Scottish immigrant named John G. Bruce. Bruce arrived in Michigan during a time when fortunes were being made from timber. Like many wealthy businessmen of the era, he saw opportunity in the forest of the Thumb region and began building his wealth through lumber operations, land ownership, and business investments. By the 1870s, he had become one of the wealthiest men in Burnside Township. And wealthy men in the Victorian era didn't just buy homes, they built statements. In 1876, John G. Bruce constructed what would become known as the Bruce Mansion, a towering French Second Empire-style home, unlike almost anything the rural area had ever seen. The mansion featured elaborate woodwork, a massive central tower, ornate trim, tall ceilings, and enough architectural detail to instantly separate it from the modern farmhouses surrounding it. Imagine living in rural Michigan in the 1870s and suddenly seeing this rise out of the countryside. It must have looked unbelievable. The home quickly became a symbol of power and prestige in the region. But there was one major problem. The same lumber industry that made men like John G. Bruce wealthy was also helping create the conditions for disaster. Because by the late 1800s, Michigan's forest had become dangerously dry, and one spark could destroy everything. In the late 1800s, Michigan was burning. Not just small fires here and there. Entire regions of the state were erupting into catastrophic infernos. After decades of aggressive logging, the land across Michigan's thumb was covered in dead branches, sawdust, stumps, and dry debris left behind by timber operations. The forests that had made men rich were now acting like fuel. And then came the drought. By 1881, conditions were perfect for disaster. That year, a massive wildfire, known today as the Thumb Fire, swept across huge portions of eastern Michigan. Entire towns were destroyed. Families fled for their lives. Thousands of people were left homeless almost overnight. Some estimates say over 1 million acres burned. Witnesses describe the sky turning black in the middle of the day, ash falling like snow, walls of fire moving faster than horses could run. And while the Bruce Mansion survived, the region around it was forever changed. The fires devastated communities throughout the Thumb and completely altered the future of towns like Burnside Township. Businesses disappeared. Farms were ruined. Entire landscapes were transformed into scorched earth. For families living in massive wooden houses like the Bruce Mansion, the fear must have been constant, because one ember could erase everything. And maybe that's part of why ghost stories eventually took hold here. Places that survive tragedy often collect legends, especially when those places are isolated, old, and filled with generations of death, loss, and memory. Over time, the Bruce Mansion became more than just a wealthy man's home. It became a local mystery. And as the years passed, the stories only got darker. By the early 1900s, the Bruce Mansion had already become one of the most recognizable homes in the region. But somewhere along the way, the stories started. At first, they were quiet rumors shared between locals. People claimed they saw figures standing in the tower windows late at night, even when nobody was supposed to be inside. Others talked about hearing footsteps moving through empty rooms.
This isn't just another real estate platform. This is something different. A place where every property has a story. Search with ease, but discover more than just location and price. Every space comes with context, history, and identity. You don't just see a home, you understand it. Want to sell? Create a listing that stands out by telling what makes your place unique. Save, share, and connect with people who value more than just square footage. We don't just sell homes, we take care of preserving and telling their story. Because every home has a story, let's discover yours. History loves company.
Then came the stories about the basement. Visitors described an overwhelming feeling of dread the moment they stepped downstairs. Some claimed they heard growling sounds echoing through the lower level. Others reported sudden cold spots, whispers, and the feeling that someone or something was following them through the house. And over time, the mansion's reputation only grew. Paranormal investigators, urban explorers, and curiosity seekers began making trips out to Burnside Township, hoping to experience something for themselves. Some left convinced the house was haunted. Others laughed it off. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. The Bruce Mansion feels strange. Part of that feeling comes from the house itself. The architecture is beautiful, but unsettling. Long hallways, narrow staircases, tower rooms overlooking empty land, aging wood creaking under every step, rooms frozen in another century. And unlike many abandoned places that feel dead, this house somehow feels awake. There are also stories tied to former owners and tragedies connected to the property over the decades. Depending on who you ask, you'll hear claims of deaths inside the home, mysterious accidents, apparitions wandering the halls, and even sightings of ghostly animals moving through the property at night. One of the most repeated legends involves the spirit of a man wearing a dark coat and top hat appearing near the staircase before vanishing entirely. Another story claims visitors have seen faces watching from the upper windows, only to realize the house was empty. And whether those stories are true or not, the legends have become part of the Bruce Mansion itself. Because sometimes history and folklore become impossible to separate. What makes the Bruce Mansion so unusual today is that it's still standing. A lot of Michigan's historic mansions disappeared decades ago. Some burned down, some were demolished, others simply collapsed from neglect. But somehow, this house survived, and stepping inside feels like walking into another era. The mansion still holds much of its Victorian character. Ornate woodwork, towering ceilings, curved staircases, old wallpaper, intricate trim, and rooms that feel frozen in time. Every creak of the floorboards reminds you that this house has been standing here since the Reconstruction era. That alone is incredible, but it's the atmosphere that people remember most. Visitors constantly describe the same feeling, the sense that the house is watching you. Not necessarily evil, just aware. And maybe part of that comes from how isolated the mansion feels. Outside, you have rural Michigan farmland stretching into the distance. Then suddenly, this massive Victorian mansion rises out of nowhere beside a small gas station. It almost doesn't make any sense, which only adds to the surreal feeling of being here. Over the years, the mansion has become something of a roadside legend in Michigan. Travelers passing through hear whispers about the haunted house next door. Paranormal fans make weekend trips to see it for themselves. And strangely enough, the experience is surprisingly accessible. Because according to countless visitors and local stories, if you stop at the gas station nearby and pay around $19 per person, someone may just let you explore the mansion all on your own. And that detail almost sounds made up, but it's become part of the legend, and I've experienced that. Imagine driving through rural Michigan late at night, pulling into a quiet gas station, paying a clerk $19, and then stepping into one of the most infamous haunted houses in all of America. Imagine driving through rural Michigan late at night, pulling into a quiet gas station, paying a clerk $19, and then walking into one of the state's most infamous haunted mansions. That feels less like normal Michigan history and more like the beginning of a horror movie. But trust me, it's safe. I totally did it. It's easy to laugh off places like the Bruce Mansion as just another haunted house story. But honestly, that misses the point. Because whether you believe in ghosts or not, places like this matter. The Bruce Mansion is one of the last surviving reminders of an entirely different Michigan. A Michigan built by immigrants, lumber barons, railroad expansion, and booming small towns that once believed the future would never end. This house has survived nearly 150 years of change. It survived devastating regional fires, economic collapse, the decline of small-town Michigan, changing ownership, decay, neglect, and time itself. And somehow, it's still here. And that's rare, especially in a state where so many historic structures have already disappeared forever. But what makes the Bruce Mansion unforgettable isn't just the architecture. It's the feeling that history still lingers inside it. Every old house carries stories. Some are beautiful, some are tragic, some become legends. And over time, the line between documented history and local folklore starts to blur together until the building itself becomes larger than life. And that's exactly what happened here. The Bruce Mansion became more than a Victorian home. It became a Michigan myth, a place people whisper about, a place teenagers dare each other to visit, a place paranormal investigators obsess over, a place photographers, historians, and explorers continue documenting before time finally catches up with it. And honestly, even if none of the ghost stories are true, standing inside a mansion that old, in complete silence, surrounded by nearly 150 years of history, is enough to make anyone feel something. The Bruce Mansion is one of those places that stays with you. Maybe it's the history. Maybe it's the architecture. Maybe it's the ghost stories. Or maybe it's just the fact that places like this barely exist anymore. In a world where so much history gets demolished, forgotten, or redeveloped, the Bruce Mansion still stands here in Burnside Township like a time capsule from another century. And whether you walk away believing it's haunted or not, you'll definitely walk away remembering it. Because this isn't just another abandoned building. It's part of Michigan's folklore now. And honestly, that might be even more powerful than the paranormal stories themselves. If you enjoyed this episode of Streets of History, make sure to subscribe to History Loves Company for more stories about forgotten places, Detroit history, Michigan legends, historic homes, and the people who shaped them. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been inside the Bruce Mansion? Did you experience something strange? And what Michigan location should we explore next? Because every place has a story, and some stories refuse to die.